Hi everyone, Vanessa here, alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 8th, 2017, and today I'm going to continue speaking on one of the four absolutes. Last week we did, or a couple days ago actually, we did absolute honesty. Today we're going to be doing absolute purity, and then next will be, let me take a look at my notes, absolute unselfishness. And then after that, we'll end with absolute love. And if you're unfamiliar with the four absolutes or the Oxford group, these are basically the foundation from which Bill Wilson of Alcoholics Anonymous fame basically derived the 12 steps. When he created the 12 steps, he added a little bit of an extra punch there just for the alcoholics to basically have an identifier, and he introduced like the physical allergy, and he got some well-known alcoholic doctors at the time to co-sign on that and give more insight on that. And that's included in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But it's all basically, and that's like the biggest differentiator between the Oxford group and Alcoholics Anonymous, is that he had to introduce this physical aspect of alcoholism. And then he reinterpreted, but basically reworked some of the four absolutes to make it a little bit more digestible for alcoholics and addicts, because we are a particular bunch. Verbiage is very important. But for all those 12 steps that exist, it all boils down to these four absolutes. And the four absolutes are in place for us to grow spiritually, to create and develop a life that is aligned to God's will for us. Basically, the promise here is that if we strive to be in alignment and to strive for spiritual wholeness and growth, that we won't actually need to live a life that takes us to drinking or drugs, that we would be free of these obsessive or addictive behaviors and substances. And so it is something to keep in mind if you're struggling with any of these, if you're struggling with honesty, for example, or even purity, and I'll get into what exactly that all is in a second, and selfishness or love. Like whenever we're struggling in these, we make ourselves a little bit more susceptible to unhealthy or even toxic behaviors. And we begin to rely on those behaviors or substances more than we do on our higher power or God. Let's just get into absolute purity. So absolute purity is not at all what it sounds like. I think that if you grew up like in purity culture, especially whenever there's like religious tones, it does give the sentiments of being sex oriented or having something to do with like impure thoughts and like maybe pornography or something. And I'm sure that this video is going to get just, I don't know if YouTube is going to flag any of those words, but anyway. And so the thing is that it is, if you really think about why we think about purity in that sense, it's because what are we looking at when we're looking at that? When we're objectifying another person and their body or pleasure, what we are doing is basically placing our pleasure or motives over someone else's well-being. And we are objectifying them, and we are no longer treating them as a divinely created creature made in the image of God, right? We are basically just seeing them as an object to receive whatever we want to receive out of that transaction or that interchange of energy. And the reality is, yeah, the motive there is not pure. And that is one form of purity. But actually, now take that feeling, that sentiment, and apply it to all areas of your life. And even with your friendships, or maybe even the kind of work that you're engaged in, or even, yeah, the social or like the communities that you're involved in, or even the news that you watch or the social media accounts that you follow. What is your intention in engaging in any of those behaviors? Some of us get really addicted to the doom scroll, right? Or the drama, or we get really addicted to maybe a sense of like power or ego that we have that's associated with certain groups or certain titles or certain roles in society. And immediately that makes our intentions or our motives for being engaged in those activities or groups automatically makes them impure. So that means that our intentions are not clear, our intentions are not pure. And what does a pure motive look like? Pure motive, if you are in alignment with God, would be one of selflessness, of helpfulness, of loving thy neighbor, of loving God. And these are very different and wildly unpopular ways to orient ourselves and like how we basically navigate this world in our lives. For example, like if you were in a job or like a career that required you to like backstab or trample all over people or engage in inappropriate relationships with people just so that you can get ahead or you can get the upper hand in certain situations, that would not be pure intentions. And then what would be your motive for even engaging in a career like that? Would it be just because of the attention or the external validation that you get? Would it be because of just the money that's involved? What are you really chasing after, and who are you hurting in the process of that chasing? This could also be in relationships, right? Like why do you engage in a relationship with somebody? Is it as pure as that you just really see something in this person and you love them and you care about them and you wish the best for them and God in them, basically? Or is it that they pay all your bills and do whatever you tell them to do, and they fulfill some role that you think they should fulfill in society of being the provider or being the nurturer? Or do you just feel more secure if you're in a relationship, even if you don't like the person, you just don't like being single? Do you just like what this person can do for you and not who this person is, actually? These are all, that is an impure way to navigate relationships, right? That is not what people are here for. And I feel like even I have been struggling with this myself, with even health, or like I joined a gym recently and I started tracking my calories, and I started I've been feeling a lot better overall, feeling more energized. I'm feeling like I have more concentration and focus during my work day. I'm sleeping well, like all of these benefits that come with like just monitoring your diet and exercise. But I weighed myself and I was like, oh, I'm not losing the weight that I want, like the way that I want to lose it. And so I immediately was like, I'm gonna cut the calories even more, gonna work out even harder. And then I was like, wait, mm, that's not, why am I doing that? That's just to punish myself for not seeing the number that I want to see on a scale. That's not pure. I'm not engaging in taking care of my body for the sake of my health and longevity. I'm doing it to meet a certain number on a scale. That's not a pure intention in why I am going to the gym and working out and eating healthy, right? And so I had to really check myself there and make sure that I am staying in alignment with God's will and being like, okay, what would actually God's will in this situation be for me? Is God more concerned about the number on a scale, or is he more concerned that I am physically moving my body, that I'm feeling good in my body, that I feel energized, that I'm able to healthily navigate this world and have the stamina to withstand everything that comes with that, and that I am nourishing my body with sufficient food and nutritious food, right? And so I really had to take a look at that and chill a little bit and give a little bit of grace to my body, but also stop punishing it just to, it's almost like my motives became really impure and obsessive in a way that was not going to be helpful. And so those are just some, I hope, helpful contrasts between what is pure and what is impure, because the Oxford group really did see purity as living morally clean. And that means not just in like in regards to sex, but like in how you think and in the words that you say and in the actions that you take, right? And making sure that again, not that just the sexual purity of it, but the purity of motives and even our desires, right? I don't know if you have ever desired something or been like envious or jealous of what somebody else has. And then you have to really look at that jealousy or that envy and be like, is it because I actually want that thing? Or is it because I want what I think is associated with that thing? Or is it I want that thing or because I just don't want them to have it? Because maybe you have some resentment towards that person, for example. And all of this really, it is important that it is in thought and in deed and in words, right? So all of our actions end up stemming from our thoughts. And this includes how we think about ourselves. And what we don't realize sometimes, and what I didn't realize for a long time, is what when I had so much self-loathing, I was in a constant state of self-sabotage. And it was like these microaggressions against myself and setting myself up for all these ways that I was going to let myself down because I did not care about myself. I had so much self-loathing and I didn't feel like I was deserving of anything that was worthy, that I wasn't worthy of anything good. And so I would engage in what like outwardly looked like normal behaviors, but I internally knew that I should not be engaging in. And I can't really think of something off the top of my head, but maybe just like overcommitting myself to things because I felt so unworthy as a person that I thought that my only function was to overperform and overfunction for everyone else around me. And so I would overextend myself and really run myself into the ground and make myself sick. And that was all what everyone around me was benefiting from that. And I appeared on the outside to be so helpful and so kind. But I wasn't doing that with pure intentions. I was doing that with the intention of manipulating everyone and manipulating everyone into thinking that I was a good and helpful person. But I was ending up getting a lot of resentments over it because I was just overextending myself and exhausting myself. And that's also I kind of sense in people now when they're overextending themselves and going above and beyond for reasons that I don't need, right? And it's if you want to be helpful, take care of yourself first, right? Before you overextend yourself. And so that's one way. Hopefully that kind of is helpful in identifying, are you living in a pure way? Are you living in absolute purity? And one way to navigate, if you are, maybe you're facing something, you're wanting to check your desires or check your motives, but below that is, and I'm going to reference this a lot in my videos, especially just because finishing up the mystical sobriety course, I really, in learning more about contemplative prayer, it really has impacted the way that I engage in relationship with God. And one way that I do that is I brought up two-way prayer before. You can check out my other video on that. And there's some resources in the links of that video if you wanted to get more instructions on how to do it. But one way that I do that is just by sitting and contemplating. And what that means is that I am just in quiet. And sometimes I will read some kind of literature. Sometimes I can read like the Bible, or I will read like a devotional, or I will read even my big book or some kind of recovery type of language, something that is like God-centered though, like higher power centered. And I will read something, I'll reflect on it, and then I will just marinate in it. I'll just like marinate in it and that is how I would describe what I've been doing with God lately is yeah, I'll ask for something. God, give me guidance in this situation. God, help me see what I'm not seeing in this situation. God, show me the truth about how I'm feeling about this because sometimes I just don't know. And what I'll do is I'll just sit and marinate in that. And what I mean by that is that I'm just reflecting and breathing in the presence of God and how in reflecting on maybe the passage that I had just read and like how that informs my life and how that informs what I know about God and how God shows up in my life and really just like turning that in not in a super intellectual way, but in a way that kind of seeps into my body. Sounds normal to you. I don't can't even believe half the words come out of my mouth sometimes. So it is just like this sinking into God's presence and being held there. And what I find in that is comfort, it's peace, it's serenity, it's guidance too. If I have the ears to hear, I will get guidance that way. And that guidance is typically always, not typically, the guidance is always aligned and redirects me to, is this loving? Is it unselfish? Is it pure? And is it honest? I'm being honest in all these ways with myself and with others and about the situation. And that is like one way to, and there's no shortcuts here, you guys. There really are no shortcuts. And I do feel like sometimes like God has afflicted me with alcoholism in a hot pursuit to slow me down and reflect because and I still struggle with this now. I do have this impulsivity to make decisions and act in certain ways. And it does usually come from the pit feeling in my stomach of, oh, I'm afraid, or oh, I'm excited, or oh, I want this, or oh, I don't want that. And so I will act impulsively on what my body is feeling. And that's not always the best measure of how I should be reacting, right? Like I do need the pause. I need the pause between the stimulus and what my reaction to that is. And I always want my what I do to be in alignment with God's will, because what I have learned is that even though externally living in alignment with God might not always be the easiest way, internally it is. It does always bring me more joy and more peace than just living out of my own selfishness and trying to manhandle life to make it fit what I think it needs to be. And so, yeah, sitting in that contemplative state, and I mean in silence. And how I envision that too is I have a studio apartment, and I just imagine God filling this apartment, it just being here, and I'm just here, and like a fish in water, like I'm a Vanessa in God. I'm just here. God is everywhere. And when I put myself in that kind of capacity and that spiritual, I almost want to say like a fog, when I'm existing and breathing in that environment, it gives me a lot of clarity on what it is that I just brought to God. It's really hard to continue being in an impure state of mind and trying to force a certain outcome in things when I am actually just soaking in and absorbing God in this way. So that's my really non-shortcut way to do it. And I do think that spiritual growth is not a shortcut. There are no shortcuts in spiritual growth and in getting to be with God and grow in God. And I wish that if I could tell anybody anywhere anything, if anyone who wants to grow in a relationship with God, it's to recognize that there are no shortcuts here. It takes that introspection, it takes that curiosity, and it takes that openness, and it takes willingness to really grapple with some of the more difficult decisions that we have to make sometimes. And these are decisions that sometimes we see other people making without any repercussions, consequences, or even without any stress. Like these are just decisions that people make and they go on their merry way. But for some reason, it tears up, and it's a different thing for everybody. It tears each of us up a little bit internally, and we're like, why am I having this reaction to this? And I just feel like that's one way that God talks to us and puts things on our heart to face and work through differently. And I personally don't want to waste that. I care about certain things and a lot of people don't care. And I have cried out to God numerous times, and that's not an exaggeration. Like, why did you make me this way? Like, why did you put this on my heart? It hurts me. It pains me. And sometimes it's, what can I do? I don't know. Sit in contemplative prayer, get closer to God, find out why this pain is, and is there anything that I can do about it now? And anyway, this is a tangent, and I'm giving you more about my contemplative journey than about purity. But that is how I kind of refine and identify what is pure in my life, is by really soaking it in the presence of God and being there in it and emerging from that and being like, okay, now am I willing to do and take the next correct pure action now that I've been able to wash away my ego and my pride, my own self-interest and motives. And one way that we can do that too is by, yes, sitting in the presence of God, but also by removing things that make us feel impure. And this is why I'm like stingy with my time on social media, and like what I'm actually really am careful about curating what comes up on my Instagram feed or even Facebook or whatever. If I see posts that I don't like or that make me feel separate from people or that make me think about certain groups of people in negative ways, there are settings that say, don't show me posts like this anymore, or hide or mute these people. And I am very careful to curate my online diet because I don't want to see things that will perpetuate fear or confusion or uncertainty, because those things are not of God, actually. And I don't really need to be involved in any of that. And also, I just don't want it to rewire the way that I think about people, because I feel very solid and I feel very good that everybody is created in the image of God. And it makes me feel like walking down the street is a miracle, and seeing people and all their different varieties of people that there are and all their personalities and good and bad. Like, I just think that's so fascinating. And I don't want to lose the joy of that, experiencing humans. And so sometimes when I see things and I'm just like, well, that just makes me hate people. That really scares me about people. That really makes me not want to talk to people anymore. Then those are the things that I try to stay away from. But also just the objectification of people as well, or even of myself. I don't like I don't know. I don't like the way that we make people so one-dimensional and strip them of their inherent divinity that's given to them by nobody but God. And like, I don't have a say in it. I don't have a say on how holy and beautifully and wonderfully created and fearfully made these other people are. But so I don't want to ingest anything, whether it's in movies or music or even real friendships or relationships or news or whatever, that is going to try to instill something in me that makes me see people as anything less than the image of God. And unfortunately, if you really look around us in society, we are bombarded. We are drowning in messages, media, music that all tells us that some people are better than others, or some people are more worthy of things than others, or that some people deserve more than others. And that's just not a philosophy that I ever want to willingly engage or perpetuate. So I need to be really mindful of those kinds of things and those types of influences, basically. And yeah, and it's not only just in those ways, but it can also be like in habits and in relationships too. I don't know if you've ever been in a toxic relationship, and not even like a romantic one, but like in a platonic friendship where there's like codependency and or there's just like dishonesty, and you just always feel like you have one eye open, just trying to see if someone's going to screw you over. And it's just, there has to come a time and a place where you're like, this is not conducive to the type of person I want to be, because it actually makes me a suspicious person or a jealous person or an insecure person. And it makes me act out and retaliate and act in ways that are not pure, right? They're not loving or honest. And so it is important to make sure that you surround yourself with people who are of pure intentions, that they don't normalize sneakiness or dishonesty or kind of backstabbing. And it also, because you do eventually become the people who you're around, and I don't know anyone who really likes being like that. And if there are things that, I mean, that you struggle with. I've struggled with resentment and just like anger and just like, why didn't this person act in a certain way that I wanted them to act so that I could feel this way about myself or whatever. Really being open to surrendering that thoughts or that behavior or that habit to God and just being like, all right, God, you're saying this. There have been times where I've just been like spinning out in my brain and being like, ah, I just can't get like, maybe like around jealousy too, right? Why did they get that? Or like, why they don't deserve that? I deserve that. Or if I had that, I would be happier. And then what that actually does is create more separation between me and God, actually, me and that person, clearly, and me and myself and my own experience, because I'm trying to externalize something that is very internal. And I sometimes I can't work through it. Some things I can't fix with the minds that broke it. So I have to just surrender that up to God and be like, God, I don't like this thought that I'm having. Like, I'm giving it over to you. Help me with it. Show me what you need me to see in that. Make this pure. And so that's another way to start getting just more practical about some of those thoughts that we just can't psychology our way out of, or self-help, or positive think our way out of. Sometimes you just need to surrender those things. And yeah, easier said than done, but something worth practicing for sure. And some of that is just sitting in prayer and kind of doing that contemplative practice that I mentioned earlier and meditating on scripture and what it's trying to tell you about you and God and your relationship with others and the world that we're in. It's all there, I promise. Yeah, so I'm curious to know more about what you do to check yourself. How do you check your motives? How do you check that you're living in alignment with what God's will is for you? I would love to hear any like practices that you guys have in place, or if there's anything that you particularly struggle with. Maybe it is self-image, maybe it is money that you have impure thoughts around. Maybe it is, yeah, sex or relationships, or maybe impure thoughts around, yeah, even just like body image or dating in general, that kind of whole thing. Those all go hand in hand on in my opinion, but or even politics. So tell me, I would love to hear your experience on this thoughts. Absolute purity. This is one of the four absolutes by the Oxford group. And again, the goal here being that if we are living these four absolutes, we can become spiritually whole and continue to grow spiritually and be more in alignment with God's will for us and our lives and fulfill our purpose here on earth as we were intended to. So thank you so much for watching and love to read your comments. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, or like this video. I would really appreciate it. Okay, thanks you guys. Bye.